The Galactic Empire ruled over the vast reaches of space with power and arrogance. Its empire stretched across countless planets, its armies of robots and artificial intelligence. AI, keeping every corner under strict control. The alien species that made up this empire saw themselves as the supreme rulers of the universe, their technology far beyond anything humans could imagine. They believed that humanity, long lost in the ruins of a forgotten Earth, had no place in the modern galaxy. On the Empire's flagship, a massive and impressive warship, a meeting was taking place among the top generals and advisors. They spoke with a sneer about the humans who had once been part of a long-forgotten war. Cryo sleep, one of the generals laughed, shaking his head. Primitive humans thought they could survive extinction by freezing themselves in time. As if a few frozen soldiers could ever pose a threat to us. The Empire's leaders had little respect for humanity, their ancient technology, and their ways of fighting. They saw their eye-controlled armies as the future, machines that never tired, never made mistakes, and never questioned orders. Why would they fear something so outdated as a human soldier? To them, humanity was nothing more than a joke, a story of the past that was not worth worrying about. In one corner of the room, a hologram flickered to life. It was a record of an ancient human operation, a program known as the Cryo soldiers. It had been launched long before the fall of Earth, a last-ditch effort to save a small group of soldiers who could fight after Earth's final war. However, after Earth had been destroyed by the Empire's forces, the project was forgotten. The Cryo soldiers were thought to be irrelevant, frozen in time, their mission unfinished, and their planet a mere memory. The commanders of the Galactic Empire couldn't believe that humans had tried to survive in such an ancient, desperate way. They laughed at the thought of a few humans, frozen, preserved in time, somehow emerging from their slumber to challenge the might of the Empire. But then, something unexpected happened. A quiet alert pinged in the corner of the war room. It was a message from one of the Empire's scouts. The Cryo soldiers, those ancient humans, had been awakened. The generals stopped laughing. At first, the news was dismissed as nonsense. Impossible, one of them muttered. How could they have awoken? Yet the data was undeniable. The Cryo soldiers, who had been thought to be nothing more than relics, were now alive. And somehow, they were aboard one of the Empire's ships. The moment was electric with confusion, disbelief, and tension. The Empire's leadership immediately ordered an investigation, but their reaction was far from concern. Instead of preparing for battle, they saw this as an opportunity to humiliate the humans once and for all. "They think they can fight back," said one of the Empire's generals. "But they're nothing more than children pretending to be warriors. We'll show them their place." The Empire's pride was its biggest weakness. They believed that with their advanced technology, there was no force in the galaxy that could challenge them. They had armies of AI soldiers, massive fleets of warships, and cloaking devices that made them invisible to the naked eye. They had perfected the art of warfare, using drones to do the fighting and robots to lead their armies. No one could defeat them, not even these old human soldiers, who had been nothing more than a failed experiment from a forgotten past. The generals laughed again, though this time with less confidence. They were eager to prove to the galaxy that humanity was weak, that their Cryo sleep project had been nothing but a futile effort. With a wave of his hand, one of the Empire's leaders ordered the soldiers to be brought before them. The generals wanted to see the humans for themselves and savor their defeat. As the humans were brought out of Cryo sleep, they were disoriented and confused. Their surroundings were strange to them. Gone were the cities of Earth. Gone were their homes, their families, their friends. What remained was a stark, cold, metallic environment, and the laughing faces of the Empire's soldiers who looked at them like they were nothing more than insects. The humans looked around, their eyes adjusting to the light, as they took in their surroundings. The weight of the years, the centuries, pressed down on them. They had been frozen, preserved in time, but the world they knew was gone. Earth, their home, had been destroyed by the very force that now mocked them. Commander Bonner, a battle-hardened leader from Earth, stepped forward from the group of soldiers. His face was grim as he looked around at the alien beings who stood before him. They were powerful, sure, but there was a fire inside Bonner and his soldiers that the Empire could never understand. They had lost their planet, their people, but they were not weak. They were survivors, and survival was something that the Empire would soon learn to fear. "Your arrogance will be your downfall," Bonner muttered under his breath, barely audible to the Empire's generals. The words had no impact on the Empire's leaders yet, but Bonner's soldiers heard him, and it gave them a glimmer of hope. They may have been outnumbered, they may have been surrounded, but humanity had something the Empire didn't, a fierce, unbreakable will to survive. As the Empire's generals prepared to mock and display the humans as a joke, they were unaware that the humans had been awakened with one purpose in mind: to show the galaxy that humans would not be forgotten, and they would never bow down to tyranny. The countdown to the humans' greatest test of survival had begun. As Bonner and his soldiers stood before the Galactic Empire's commanders, the tension in the air was thick. The Empire's leaders had made it clear that they saw these humans as nothing more than relics, unworthy of even a fight. They laughed, believing it would be easy to capture or kill these ancient soldiers. To them, the humans were nothing more than fragile beings, frozen in time and left to decay in their cryo sleep chambers. But Commander Bonner and his team weren't about to go down quietly. They were soldiers, trained for battle, and even though they had been frozen for centuries, they were far from weak. There was still fire in their hearts, and they were determined to show the Empire just how wrong they were. The Empire's ship was enormous, a floating fortress surrounded by drones and robot soldiers. They were heavily guarded, and the human soldiers were outnumbered and outgunned. Still, Bonner and his team knew that they could not just wait for their inevitable end. They had to act, and they had to act fast. Bonner's plan was simple but risky. They had to break free from their restraints and get control of the ship's systems. If they could do that, they could cause enough chaos to escape and send a message to the Empire that humans were not to be underestimated. The only problem was, they had no idea how much time they had before the Empire decided to dispose of them once and for all. As the guards stood at attention, keeping a close eye on the human soldiers, Bonner quietly signaled to his team. Each of them knew their role and what had to be done. It was risky, but they had no choice. They had to fight or die trying. Bonner, still dressed in the remnants of his old military uniform, moved with calm precision. His eyes scanned the room, taking note of every guard, every possible exit, every piece of technology that might give them an advantage. He knew that a direct confrontation with the Empire's forces would be a losing battle. Their technology was too advanced, and their numbers were overwhelming. But Bonner had something the Empire's leaders didn't: unpredictability. He waited until the moment was just right. With a sharp movement, he broke free from the guard's grip, using his military training to overpower them. It wasn't enough to escape completely, but it was enough to create a distraction. His team followed suit, springing into action and overpowering their captors one by one. The ship's security systems immediately kicked into high gear, alarms blaring and lights flashing. But the humans didn't panic. They had been trained for situations like this. Working together, they used their knowledge of the ship's layout to evade the Empire's patrols. They moved quickly through the corridors, taking out any robot soldiers they encountered along the way. They weren't just fighting for their lives. They were fighting for humanity's survival. As they moved through the ship, Bonner realized that they needed to get to the control room, the heart of the Empire's power on the ship. If they could take control of the ship's systems, they might be able to turn the tables on the Empire. But the control room was heavily guarded, and the closer they got, the more intense the resistance became. One of the Empire's elite squads of robotic soldiers stood between them and their goal. These robots were faster and stronger than anything the humans had ever encountered, and they seemed nearly invincible. The humans were outnumbered and outgunned, but Bonner refused to back down. He looked at his soldiers, their faces grim but determined. "We fight for humanity's future," he said, his voice steady. "We fight because no one else will. We may be outmatched, but we will not let them win." With that, the humans launched into action. They used everything at their disposal, distracting the robots with smoke bombs, using old-fashioned hand-to-hand combat techniques, and hacking into the ship's security systems. It wasn't easy, and several of Bonner's soldiers were injured in the fight. But they pressed on, each strike bringing them closer to their goal. The battle was fierce, but the humans had something the Empire's robots lacked: heart. They fought with passion, knowing that this wasn't just a battle for their lives. It was a battle for the survival of humanity itself. Every blow they landed, every piece of technology they destroyed, was a small victory. And with each victory, they grew stronger, more determined to see this mission through. At one point, Sergeant Quinn, one of Bonner's closest allies, found himself face to face with a heavily armored robot. The robot's laser weapon hummed as it charged up, ready to fire. Quinn dove to the side just in time, narrowly avoiding the blast. He returned fire with his plasma rifle, hitting the robot square in its core. The robot exploded in a shower of sparks, and the humans moved on, their morale boosted by the small victory. Despite the setbacks, they finally reached the control room. The door was reinforced, but Bonner knew they could break through if they worked together. As they approached, the Empire's forces began to flood the area, their advanced weapons ready to tear them apart. "Ready?" Bonner asked his soldiers, his voice steady despite the danger. "Ready," came the reply. With a final push, they stormed the control room. It was a chaotic scene: gunfire, explosions, and the sound of metal grinding as they tore through the door. The human soldiers fought their way inside, taking control of the room and shutting down the Empire's security systems. The Empire's forces outside tried to break through, but they were too late. The humans had won this battle. Bonner stood at the control panel, breathing heavily but smiling with triumph. He had done it. They had done it. Against all odds, the humans had struck first. The Empire would soon realize that humanity wasn't as weak as they thought. And this was just the beginning. The humans' unexpected victory in the control room sent a ripple of shock throughout the entire ship. Bonner and his team had not only survived, but had managed to take control of a critical part of the Empire's most advanced warship. They had seized the initiative, but their fight was far from over. The Empire's leadership could not fathom how a group of ancient humans, frozen for centuries, could pose such a threat to their mighty empire. Back on the bridge of the warship, the Empire's high command was in complete disarray. The news that the humans had breached the control room spread like wildfire. The generals and commanders who had laughed at the humans just hours earlier were now scrambling to make sense of what was happening. Their perfect military structure was beginning to fall apart. "This cannot be," one of the generals muttered, his eyes wide with disbelief. "We've outclassed them in every way. Our drones, our weapons. How could they have gotten past our defenses?" The generals had underestimated humanity in every way. They had thought that their technological superiority, an army of robots and an unbeatable fleet, would be enough to crush any resistance. The thought of an enemy relying on old-fashioned human strength, cunning, and ingenuity had never crossed their minds. To them, humans were no more than an afterthought, a species too weak to challenge the future of the galaxy. But Bonner and his soldiers were proving them wrong. The humans were unpredictable. They were fierce, resourceful, and determined. And most importantly, they were not afraid to die. For them, this was not just a fight for survival. It was a fight to remind the galaxy that humanity would never be erased, that they had not been defeated, and that they would never accept being controlled. The Empire's commanders immediately began to rally their forces, calling in reinforcements from all corners of the ship. They couldn't afford to let this embarrassment continue. They ordered their robots to launch a full assault on the humans in the control room, flooding the area with combat units and drones. It was a desperate attempt to retake the ship, to regain control before the humans could do any more damage. These robots were faster and stronger than anything the humans had ever encountered, and they seemed nearly invincible. The humans were outnumbered and outgunned, but Bonner refused to back down. He looked at his soldiers, their faces grim but determined. "We fight for humanity's future," he said, his voice steady. "We fight because no one else will. We may be outmatched, but we will not let them win." With that, the humans launched into action. They used everything at their disposal, distracting the robots with smoke bombs, using old-fashioned hand-to-hand combat techniques, and hacking into the ship's security systems. It wasn't easy, and several of Bonner's soldiers were injured in the fight. But they pressed on, each strike bringing them closer to their goal. The battle was fierce, but the humans had something the Empire's robots lacked: heart. They fought with passion, knowing that this wasn't just a battle for their lives. It was a battle for the survival of humanity itself. Every blow they landed, every piece of technology they destroyed, was a small victory. And with each victory, they grew stronger, more determined to see this mission through. At one point, Sergeant Quinn, one of Bonner's closest allies, found himself face to face with a heavily armored robot. The robot's laser weapon hummed as it charged up, ready to fire. Quinn dove to the side just in time, narrowly avoiding the blast. He returned fire with his plasma rifle, hitting the robot square in its core. The robot exploded in a shower of sparks, and the humans moved on, their morale boosted by the small victory. Despite the setbacks, they finally reached the control room. The door was reinforced, but Bonner knew they could break through if they worked together. As they approached, the Empire's forces began to flood the area, their advanced weapons ready to tear them apart. "Ready?" Bonner asked his soldiers, his voice steady despite the danger. "Ready," came the reply. With a final push, they stormed the control room. It was a chaotic scene: gunfire, explosions, and the sound of metal grinding as they tore through the door. The human soldiers fought their way inside, taking control of the room and shutting down the Empire's security systems. The Empire's forces outside tried to break through, but they were too late. The humans had won this battle. Bonner stood at the control panel, breathing heavily but smiling with triumph. He had done it. They had done it. Against all odds, the humans had struck first. The Empire would soon realize that humanity wasn't as weak as they thought. And this was just the beginning. The humans' unexpected victory in the control room sent a ripple of shock throughout the entire ship. Bonner and his team had not only survived, but had managed to take control of a critical part of the Empire's most advanced warship. They had seized the initiative, but their fight was far from over. The Empire's leadership could not fathom how a group of ancient humans, frozen for centuries, could pose such a threat to their mighty empire. Back on the bridge of the warship, the Empire's high command was in complete disarray. The news that the humans had breached the control room spread like wildfire. The generals and commanders who had laughed at the humans just hours earlier were now scrambling to make sense of what was happening. Their perfect military structure was beginning to fall apart. "This cannot be," one of the generals muttered, his eyes wide with disbelief. "We've outclassed them in every way. Our drones, our weapons. How could they have gotten past our defenses?" The generals had underestimated humanity in every way. They had thought that their technological superiority, an army of robots and an unbeatable fleet, would be enough to crush any resistance. The thought of an enemy relying on old-fashioned human strength, cunning, and ingenuity had never crossed their minds. To them, humans were no more than an afterthought, a species too weak to challenge the future of the galaxy. But Bonner and his soldiers were proving them wrong. The humans were unpredictable. They were fierce, resourceful, and determined. And most importantly, they were not afraid to die. For them, this was not just a fight for survival. It was a fight to remind the galaxy that humanity would never be erased, that they had not been defeated, and that they would never accept being controlled. The Empire's commanders immediately began to rally their forces, calling in reinforcements from all corners of the ship. They couldn't afford to let this embarrassment continue. They ordered their robots to launch a full assault on the humans in the control room, flooding the area with combat units and drones. It was a desperate attempt to retake the ship, to regain control before the humans could do any more damage. But Bonner was ready for this. He had expected a counterattack, and his team had prepared for it. The control room, though small, was a stronghold. The walls were lined with defenses, and Bonner had quickly taken advantage of the Empire's complacency. They had set up makeshift barricades, using debris and spare parts from the ship. The humans had no advanced weaponry, just their skills, and whatever they could find. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The first wave of robots charged in, their metallic bodies moving with terrifying precision. They were faster, stronger, and better equipped than any human soldier, but Bonner's team had the one advantage the Empire's machines did not. They were fighting for something more than just a mission. They were fighting for their lives, for their people, for their planet. The robots opened fire, their weapons blasting through the air, but the humans were ready. They ducked behind cover, returning fire with their plasma rifles, aiming for weak spots in the robot's armor. The battle raged on, with sparks flying and explosions shaking the walls. It was a chaotic scene, a blur of metal and fire, but through it all, Bonner's soldiers held their ground. "Keep them back," Bonner shouted, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Don't let them breach the barricades. Hold your positions." The humans fought like men and women who had nothing to lose, who had already lost everything. Every shot they fired, every punch they landed, was a small act of defiance against the Empire's tyranny. And it worked. Slowly, the humans began to push back the robots, taking out one unit after another. But the Empire wasn't going to give up so easily. Realizing that brute force wasn't enough, they switched tactics. The Empire deployed its secret weapon, the eye-controlled drones that had been designed for the most critical missions. These drones were equipped with cloaking technology, making them nearly invisible to the human soldiers. They moved silently through the air, targeting the humans with deadly precision. Bonner saw the drones coming, but by the time they appeared, it was too late. The first drone dove straight at him, its laser weapon aimed directly at his chest. In that split second, Bonner made a choice. He didn't move. He couldn't. There was no time to escape. The drone fired, but Bonner wasn't there. In the blink of an eye, he had disappeared, fading into thin air. It wasn't some kind of magic or luck. It was the human's secret weapon. Bonner had managed to activate one of the ship's cloaking devices. The humans may not have had the Empire's advanced technology, but they had learned to adapt and improvise. Using the resources at their disposal, they had reversed-engineered the ship's cloaking technology. Bonner had used it just in time to avoid the drone's deadly shot. He reappeared in the shadows, watching the drone fly past him, unaware of his presence. "Move," Bonner ordered his team, signaling for them to use the cloaking devices as well. The humans were now able to move undetected, taking out drones one by one as they advanced deeper into the ship. The robots, once unstoppable, were now vulnerable. The Empire's arrogance had blinded them to the reality that these humans, even frozen in time, were capable of surprising them at every turn. The battle was no longer about technology. It was about willpower, about the determination to survive. Despite the overwhelming odds, the humans fought back with everything they had. They moved through the ship like ghosts, appearing and disappearing, striking with deadly precision. The Empire's forces were thrown into disarray. The robots didn't know who to target, and the drones were no match for the humans' clever tactics. The Empire's grip on the warship was slipping. Back on the bridge, the generals were beginning to panic. The situation was spiraling out of control, and they still couldn't understand how these humans had managed to disrupt their flawless system. They had underestimated humanity, and now it was too late. The warship was no longer theirs to command, and the humans were only getting started. The humans were now deep in enemy territory. and the stakes were higher than ever. The Empire's forces were relentless, but Bonner and his team had managed to hold their ground, despite the overwhelming odds. Every step they took through the warship was a battle, and every corner they turned could be their last. But the humans refused to back down. They had one goal: survival, and they would do whatever it took to achieve it. The battle raged on in the narrow corridors of the warship. Bonner's team had become experts in guerrilla warfare, using their environment to their advantage. They set traps, used their cloaking devices to surprise enemy forces, and fought with a ferocity that surprised even them. They weren't just fighting to win. They were fighting to prove that humanity could never be erased, never be forgotten, and never be ruled by the Empire. As they pushed deeper into the warship, the humans encountered more advanced enemies. The Empire had deployed its elite soldiers, human-controlled cyborgs who were stronger and faster than any of the robots the humans had fought before. These cyborgs were armed with powerful energy weapons and were trained to hunt down and eliminate any threat. But Bonner's team wasn't intimidated. They had faced worse odds in the past, and they knew how to fight back. Sergeant Quinn, still recovering from his earlier injuries, was the first to encounter the cyborgs. He had always been the most fearless of Bonner's soldiers, and now was no different. As he stepped into the corridor, a group of cyborgs appeared at the far end, their glowing eyes fixed on him. Without hesitation, Quinn raised his plasma rifle and fired. The cyborgs moved with lightning speed, dodging the blast and returning fire. Quinn dove behind a corner just as the energy blast whizzed past him, narrowly missing. He quickly fired again, hitting one of the cyborgs square in the chest. The cyborg staggered, its internal systems overloaded by the shot, but it didn't fall. Instead, it aimed its energy weapon directly at Quinn. Just as the cyborg was about to fire, Bonner appeared from behind, using his cloaking device to remain unseen. He launched a grenade at the cyborg's feet, causing a massive explosion. The cyborg was sent flying, its systems short-circuiting from the blast. Quinn looked up, breathing heavily but with a grin on his face. "You're getting slow, old man," he teased Bonner, referring to his superior officer. Bonner chuckled, but there was no time for jokes. "Stay focused, Quinn. We're not out of this yet." The humans continued to press forward, moving from one room to another, taking down cyborg after cyborg. Every time they thought they had won, another wave of enemies came. The warship was vast, and the Empire had more soldiers than the humans could count. But Bonner's team was relentless, refusing to let fear control them. They fought with everything they had, pushing themselves beyond their limits, always moving, always adapting. They finally reached the central control room, where the Empire's most powerful leaders were waiting. The doors to the control room were reinforced, and it was heavily guarded. But Bonner knew this was their only chance. If they could take out the Empire's leadership, they would cripple the entire warship. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way they could turn the tide in their favor. The humans set up a plan. They would breach the door and take out the guards quickly. Once inside, they would disable the control systems, cutting off the Empire's communication with the rest of the ship. It was a risky move, but they had no other choice. They couldn't afford to let the Empire regroup and send more reinforcements. Bonner signaled to his team. It was time. They moved into position, and within moments, they were at the door. Quinn was the first to plant explosives on the door's control panel. The rest of the team spread out, ready to attack. The explosion rocked the entire corridor, and the door flew open with a loud bang. The humans stormed into the control room, guns blazing. The Empire's elite guards were waiting for them, but the humans were faster. They moved like shadows, taking out the guards one by one, using their superior tactics to overwhelm the enemy. But just as Bonner and his team thought they had the upper hand, the Empire's leader appeared. He was a tall, imposing figure, his face cold and calculating. He was surrounded by a group of robotic soldiers, each one more advanced than any they had faced before. The leader's voice echoed through the room, filled with contempt. Did you really think you could defeat the Empire? He sneered. You are nothing but relics, frozen in time, outclassed by the technology of the future. You stand no chance against us. Bonner stepped forward, his eyes locking with the leaders. We've already proven that we can defeat your machines, he said, his voice steady. And we'll prove that we can defeat you, too. The leader laughed, a cold, harsh sound. We'll see about that. The final battle was about to begin. The Empire's soldiers charged at the humans, their weapons blazing. Bonner and his team fought back with everything they had, their rifles and grenades tearing through the room. The robots were strong, but the humans were faster, more agile, and more determined. Quinn took down 2 of the robots with quick, precise shots, while Bonner led the charge, cutting through the Empire's defenses. The battle was brutal, but the humans were relentless. Every time they thought they had been cornered, they found a way to fight back. Every blow they landed was a victory for humanity. But just when it seemed like the humans might win, the Empire's leader activated a hidden weapon. The room began to shake, and the walls closed in, trapping the humans inside. The leader smirked, knowing he had them cornered. You fought bravely, but this is the end, he said. Bonner's team was trapped, and the Empire's leader was about to deliver the final blow. But Bonner had one last trick up his sleeve. He activated a hidden override in the warship systems, using the control room systems to turn the weapon back on the Empire. The leader's smile faltered as the weapon malfunctioned, and the warship began to shake violently. The humans weren't finished yet. The fight for survival was far from over, and the Empire's underestimation of humanity had just cost them everything. The warship was now on the brink of collapse. With the Empire's leader distracted by the malfunctioning weapon, Bonner's team saw a glimmer of hope. The humans, battered and bruised, but still standing strong, fought with everything they had. The warship trembled around them, the walls shaking, as if the very ship itself was trying to throw them off. Bonner knew this was their chance. The Empire's defenses were failing, but the enemy was still powerful, and the final battle was fast approaching. The humans didn't have much time. The leader, realizing what had happened, began barking orders, trying to regain control over the situation. But it was too late. The damage had been done. As the humans pressed forward, they could hear the frantic footsteps of the Empire's soldiers, rushing to stop them. The sounds of explosions echoed through the halls as the warship shook again. It was clear that this was the last stand. There would be no retreat, no surrender. The humans had no choice but to fight with everything they had. Quinn, who had been at the front of the line for most of the battle, now felt the weight of exhaustion in his bones. His body was covered in cuts and bruises, but his resolve was stronger than ever. He had seen too many of his brothers in arms fall, and he wasn't going to let their sacrifices be in vain. Keep pushing forward, he shouted, his voice hoarse but determined. We're almost there. Bonner led the charge, his mind focused on the final objective. They had to reach the central core of the warship, the heart of the Empire's control system. It was their only chance to destroy the ship and stop the Empire's assault. But the closer they got, the harder the fighting became. The Empire had activated its last line of defense, an army of advanced battle droids, each one more powerful than the last. The battle raged on in the narrow metallic corridors of the warship. The humans fought fiercely, but the droids were relentless. Their robotic bodies were impervious to most of the human weapons, and they fought with a precision that left no room for error. Bonner was the first to engage, his plasma rifle cutting through the air as he took down one droid after another. His team followed close behind, moving as one unit, their weapons blazing as they fought for survival. The clattering sound of their footsteps echoed through the halls, blending with the sounds of gunfire and explosions. In the middle of the chaos, Sergeant Quinn was knocked to the ground by a droid's powerful punch. His rifle flew from his hands, but he didn't panic. He quickly grabbed a nearby energy blade and swung it at the droid's midsection. The blade sliced through the droid's armor with ease, and it collapsed to the ground, sparking and twitching. Quinn stood up, a fierce smile on his face, and continued the fight. Bonner, seeing Quinn's success, knew they were gaining ground, but there was still so much to do. The droids kept coming, relentless and unyielding. Bonner and his team fought back with everything they had, but each victory felt bittersweet. Every time they took down a droid, another seemed to take its place. Finally, they'd reached the central core of the warship, the heart of the Empire's control systems. It was a massive chamber filled with glowing blue energy conduits and rows of computer terminals. The Empire had kept this room heavily guarded, but Bonner's team had fought their way through. Bonner looked around the room, taking in the sight of their objective. This was it. If they could disable the core, they would cripple the entire warship. But they didn't have much time. The Empire's soldiers were closing in, and the warship's self-destruct sequence had already begun. "We need to get this done now," Bonner shouted. "Quinn, set the charges. The rest of you, cover him." Quinn nodded, his hand steady despite the chaos around him. He moved quickly, planting explosives on the core's control systems. His heart raced as he worked, but he didn't let the pressure get to him. He knew this was their only chance. If they didn't succeed now, everything they had fought for would be for nothing. The Empire's soldiers arrived just as Quinn finished planting the charges. They were too late. Bonner's team opened fire, taking down the enemy soldiers with a brutal efficiency. The battle was fierce, but the humans were winning. They had already proven that they could stand up to the Empire's might, and now they were proving that they could defeat it. Bonner's heart pounded in his chest as he moved towards the control panel. He punched in the override codes, triggering the countdown for the warship's self-destruction. The screens flashed red, and the room shook with the intensity of the ship's final moments. "We've done it," Bonner said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Now we get out of here." But the escape wouldn't be easy. The Empire's final line of defense, their leader, was still alive, and he was desperate. He activated the warship's automated defense systems, unleashing a barrage of missiles and energy blasts at the humans. The room exploded into chaos, with the humans dodging blasts and taking cover wherever they could. Bonner and his team fought their way out of the chamber, but not without sacrifice. Quinn, who had been leading the charge, was hit by a blast, sending him flying across the room. He hit the ground hard, his body battered and bloodied. Bonner rushed to his side, his heart sinking as he saw the severity of Quinn's injuries. "You have to go," Quinn gasped, his voice weak. "Finish this, for all of us." Bonner's eyes filled with rage and sorrow. He had lost so many friends in this battle, and Quinn was the last of them. But there was no time for grief. The warship was about to explode, and they needed to escape. Bonner nodded, his jaw clenched. "I'll finish it, Quinn. You did your part. Now rest." With a final, heart-wrenching glance at his fallen comrade, Bonner ran toward the exit. His team followed closely behind, their mission far from over. As they sprinted through the warship, explosions and gunfire echoed around them, signaling the end of an era. But the humans had done it. They had survived. And they had won. The Empire would never forget the lesson they had learned today, that humanity could never be underestimated. No matter how advanced their technology, no matter how vast their empire, the humans would always find a way to fight back. As the warship exploded in the distance, Bonner knew that the battle for the future had just begun. But for now, the humans had claimed victory. And that was enough. As Bonner and his team raced through the warship's collapsing corridors, they could hear the deafening sounds of explosions behind them. The countdown was nearing its end, and the warship was disintegrating piece by piece. The Empire's once mighty ship, the pride of their military, was now a ticking time bomb. Bonner's heart pounded in his chest as he led the way toward the escape pods. His team followed closely behind, their every step heavy with the weight of what they had just accomplished. They had destroyed the Empire's warship and crippled their forces, but there was no time to rest. The mission was far from over. As they reached the escape pod bay, Bonner saw the flashing red lights of the countdown ticking away. The moment of escape was almost upon them. However, just as they were about to board the pods, a voice crackled through Bonner's comms. "This is the Empire's flagship. You think you've won." The voice was cold and filled with malice. "You've only delayed the inevitable. The Empire's vengeance will come for you, and nothing will save you. The Empire is forever." Bonner's jaw clenched. He recognized the voice. It was the same one that had ordered the destruction of his comrades, the same voice that had mocked humanity's strength. But now, in this moment, it didn't matter. The Empire had underestimated humanity, and now it was paying the price. Bonner gave a short, defiant laugh. "You're wrong. Humanity is here to stay, and you'll never break us." He motioned for his team to board the escape pods. One by one, the soldiers climbed into their pods, securing themselves for the perilous journey back to the planet below. The countdown continued, the ship shaking violently as its systems failed, but Bonner couldn't help but feel a strange sense of pride. The fight was far from over, but humanity had proven something that day. They had stood up to an empire that had ruled the galaxy for centuries, and they had survived. They had fought back. The pods launched from the warship, hurtling toward the surface of the planet below. As Bonner looked out of the small viewport, he could see the warship beginning to break apart in the distance. The once proud vessel was now a fiery ball of debris, its engine sputtering out of control as it fell into the planet's atmosphere. Bonner leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes for a moment. He thought of his fallen comrades, his friends who had given their lives so that humanity could survive. The faces of the soldiers who had fought by his side flashed in his mind. They had all made a sacrifice, and their sacrifice would not be forgotten. "Mission accomplished," Bonner muttered under his breath. "For all of them." The escape pods made their way toward the planet's surface, and Bonner knew that when they landed, their fight would continue. The Empire wasn't going to give up that easily. But that was something humanity had learned long ago. They had the strength to keep fighting, no matter the odds. And no matter how powerful their enemies were, they would never give up. As the escape pods hit the ground with a soft thud, Bonner's heart surged with hope. They were alive. They had made it. They had survived the Empire's final attack, and they had dealt a blow to their oppressive rule. The warship was destroyed, the Empire's pride shattered, and now humanity had a chance to rebuild. The team disembarked from the pods, their boots hitting the dusty ground of the planet's surface. Bonner took a deep breath of the thin, dry air. It wasn't home. Earth was still far away. But it was a victory. The planet was theirs now, and they had earned it. Around them, the other soldiers began to regroup. They were battered, scared, but alive. Bonner looked at each of them, his heart swelling with pride. They had fought together, and together they had won. Humanity had proven itself capable of standing up to any threat, no matter how overwhelming. But as they gathered, Bonner knew that the war wasn't over. The Empire still existed, and it would not forget the humans who had dared to defy them. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had made enemies along the way. But they had also made allies. There were those who had watched from the sidelines, who had seen the Empire's cruelty, and had waited for a sign that humanity was worth their trust. Bonner knew that the victory they had achieved today would inspire others to rise up, to join the fight against the Empire and any other forces that threatened peace. He turned to his team. "We've won today, but the war isn't over. We need to stay vigilant. We need to be ready for whatever comes next." His team nodded, their faces determined. They had survived the worst, and now they were ready for anything. They were not just survivors, they were warriors, and they had proven that humanity would never back down. As Bonner looked out at the horizon, he saw something he hadn't expected, a new beginning. The Empire's reign was over, and humanity had shown that even in the face of overwhelming odds, they would always find a way to fight. They had made their mark on the galaxy, and now the future was theirs to shape. Humanity had triumphed, and the stars would never be the same.